The Advocacy and Outreach Director for the North Carolina Down Syndrome Alliance. I would like to welcome you to the North Carolina Down Syndrome Virtual Speaker Series, which is hosted by NCDSA in coordination with Coastal Buds, the Down Syndrome Network of Onslow and Carteret Counties, the Down Syndrome Network of Greater Greensboro, the Down Syndrome Association of the Greater Winston-Salem, the Down Syndrome Association of Greater Charlotte, and High Country Buddy Walk. As you know, the virtual speaker series is presented on the third Wednesday of each month, starting at 7:30, and it is free. I will caution you that December will be a week early because of the holidays. Registration is open now for November, and registration closes on Monday night before the Wednesday webinar, so that there's time to get everyone that registered the links to the webinar and the information for Wednesday night. Tonight's webinar is being recorded, and barring any technical issues, you will receive an email next week with the recording of the webinar. There will not be PowerPoint slides. Instead, there will be a link to the resources that will be talked about this evening. I want to remind everyone to please take 1 or 2 minutes. Actually, it probably only takes 45 seconds to complete the brief survey that was included in the email you got with the link for today. And there are auto-generated captions have been enabled. So if anyone would like those captions, you could turn those on for yourself. The questions and answers will be handled in the Q&A box, not the chat. So any questions and answers should be put in the Q&A box, and they will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Tonight's webinar is Able Accounts and Special Needs Trust with Ryan Platt of A Special Needs Plan. And I would like to welcome Ryan and thank him for sharing his expertise on this important subject and his Wednesday evening with us. Since you already know what the description is and who Ryan is, I'm going to let Ryan introduce himself and talk a little bit about what he does before he jumps into the webinar. Thank you, Ryan.
You got it. No, thank you, Donna. It's an honor and a pleasure to be part of the virtual speaker series. So thank you for having us. It's fantastic. And I'm excited to talk about tonight's topic of Able and Special Needs Trust. I know those are two specific items that seem to have a great deal of interest when we think about planning for the future and planning for 2 lifetimes, really, right? The rest of our lifetime as parents, and then the rest of our children's lifetime as well. As Donna said, I'm with A Special Needs Plan. We have been honored and humbled to serve families that have a loved one with a diagnosis since 2005. And so we've built an organization that helps people with government benefits, that helps people put the plan together, that helps people. We even have attorneys that we partner with in our office, that help us with the legal documents for folks. So really tried to build kind of a one-stop shop for families so that, you can, as I always say, kind of breathe a little easier on different questions that you may have about the future and the present. So it's been great, and we're fortunate enough to be able to serve families all over the country. So that's going to be the boring part, because really, what are we here to do? We're here to talk about information that's important for you as we walk forward. So as Donna mentioned, I created some slides for this evening that I'll walk through here for a little bit of time, and then what we'll do is we'll come back for questions and answers. And so please feel free to ask your question. I always say, if you have a question, somebody else probably does too. So please don't be shy. I always start with this disclosure just to let you know that everything we talk about today is general in nature. So it's not necessarily specific to your family or any one family, and it's not specific advice either. As Donna already said, I'm Ryan Platt with A Special Needs Plan, and it is an honor to be here today. We're going to talk about, really focus on Able Accounts, Special Needs Trusts, and then how do we use those two tools together in a coordinated plan going forward for your family. Because that's really what we want to do, right? Yes, it's important to understand what they are, but as I've learned over the years, it's more important to understand how to use them and also when to use them. So that's really what I want to provide for you guys today. It's not just the nuts and bolts of it, but how do you actually use them and when do you actually use them? And able accounts and special needs trusts, one of the things that I want you to give you an idea of why they are important is because they are very much connected to government benefits. So depending on the age of your child, you may have some government benefits. And some of the government benefits that we talk a lot about are what's called SSI, which is a monthly income stream, and then also Medicaid and Medicaid waiver programs. Well, those types of benefits have a resource limit in terms of your child having money in their name and still being able to qualify for benefits. And that asset resource limit in 2023 is only $2,000. $2,000 that your loved one can have in a checking account, savings account, investment account, if they're working, a Roth IRA or a 401k or things like that. $2,000, that's it. Well, here come able accounts and special needs trusts. Now your family and your loved one has two options where they can have access to money above that asset resource limit and continue to qualify for those government benefits that I just mentioned. So that is huge. And they are so very important. At the same time, they are going to be different and used in different ways. When I think of an ABLE account, just to give you some brief history on it, because I don't want to bore you too much with how it came to be, but it was passed in the legislation back at the end of 2014. And it was passed at a federal level first because of some of the, where it sits basically in the tax code. So it had to be federally approved and passed into law. And then every state that wanted to had to ratify the ABLE so that it would be eligible in their state as well. If you're here from North Carolina, which I'm guessing most of you are, then North Carolina has an ABLE account. And we're going to talk a little bit about that one, but we're going to talk about others as well in general, and just to give you an idea of what are the attributes of an ABLE account that you want to ensure that your loved one has available to them. So it came into existence about 2016, and it has very specific benefits. It's also going to have some disadvantages, but everything does, right? Nothing is going to be perfect. Few of the benefits of the ABLE are you can have money, or your loved one really can have money in this account above that asset resource limit of $2,000 and still keep their government benefits. So they could have $5,000 in there, they could have $50,000 in there. As long as it's in that specific ABLE account, then Medicaid, Social Security does not count it towards that $2,000 asset limit, so they can keep their benefits. The ABLE account also has some tax advantages. What does that mean? Well, if you place money in the ABLE account and then it grows, right? It gains interest or it has a positive rate of return, you don't have to pay taxes on any of that interest as you're earning it. And if the distributions or withdrawals from the ABLE account come out for what's called qualified disability expenses, then again, no taxes have to be paid. So that's quite an advantage. And we're going to talk about what the qualified disability expenses are as we go through today. And one of the things I always say about ABLE accounts is it's a place to save the individual's money. Well, who's the individual? The individual is your loved one with Down syndrome. That's it. So their money. And why do I say that? Well, because of the flip side of the benefit coin is going to be the disadvantage side, right? The heads and the tails of the same coin. One, there's an annual funding limit. And that annual funding limit is $17,000. So that means that you cannot place more than $17,000 in an ABLE account in any one calendar year. Now, again, that can be a good sum of money. But on the other hand, let's say that a parent has a job and has employee benefits and has life insurance at work that's $50,000 and they pass away. Can that $50,000 go in the ABLE account? No, it's too large. It doesn't fit within that annual funding limit. So it's not, so the ABLE account's not going to be a good use for that type of money. Another disadvantage is the maximum account value. So that's contribution plus any growth. Once that value achieves $100,000 or more, SSI, that monthly income stream, is suspended. The individual with an ABLE account above 100,000 will keep their Medicaid and will keep their waiver services. But if they're receiving that SSI, that monthly income will be suspended. So again, when we look at that, we say, okay, well, that can cause major headaches for a family or a caregiver or a guardian or a parent or all those things. Because if all of a sudden you have an ABLE account and let's say you have it invested in some of the investment models that we're going to talk about again a little bit today, and the stock market goes up by 20%, and now you're at 102,000 and your loved one's SSI is suspended, and then all of a sudden the next month the market's down 10%. Well, now we're under 100. Is Social Security going to call you and check on your ABLE account, or are you going to have to run through the hoops and jump through those hoops to reinstate that SSI? More than likely, it's going to cause headaches and time, energy, and frustration. So that's why when we're thinking of ABLE accounts, we're thinking, okay, we'd rather have lower, at least make sure it stays lower than $100,000 if your loved one's receiving SSI. Another disadvantage is the payback to Medicaid. So what that is if your child started an ABLE account this year and they are 25 years old and they live for 40 more years, Medicaid can come back at the end of their life and say, well, from the day that you started the ABLE account, here are all the services that we provided. And those services cost X. And you have Y in your ABLE account. So we are going to take that money and repay ourselves for those services that we provided. And so again, we want to think from this screen, here's what we want to be thinking. ABLE account, kind of lower sums of money, right? That's what we want to be thinking about. So when do we use an ABLE account? Lower sums of money. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through tonight. What are the details of an ABLE account? So I already talked a little bit about the fact that your loved one can have money in an ABLE account above the asset resource limit and still qualify for those needs-based government benefits that we've mentioned. Well, sometimes I have received questions about, well, my loved one's working. Maybe they're working 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 hours a week, and they're receiving an income. And that income's getting dangerously close to the Medicaid monthly income limit to keep their Medicaid benefits. And I get a question like this, say, hey, Ryan, if I take their work income and I put it directly in the ABLE account, does that income still count towards that monthly income limit for Medicaid? Or kind of does it get hidden, so to speak, if I put it directly in the ABLE account? And the question's no, right? You can't reduce income by saving it in an ABLE account. especially when we're thinking about government benefit qualification. It's only the asset or the savings value that is not countable towards these government benefit qualifications. The other item is, we talked about qualified disability expenses. What are some of them, right? This is where the ABLE account shines. It absolutely glows because we can use it for so many things to benefit your loved one. And you can see this list, right? You can help pay for rent from an ABLE account. You can help pay for the grocery store shopping and food, clothes, shoes, technology, computers, phones, therapies, employment assistance, so many different pieces, as long as it is for your loved one, right? They are buying it for themselves, or the authorized representative, we're going to talk about that in a minute too, is buying it for them. Then money can be used for just about anything, which has extreme value when we introduce you to the special needs trust and how these two can be used together. We also received quite a lot of questions on ownership of an ABLE account. And this is going to be dependent on the age of your child, right? If your child's under the age of 18 and you're going to start an ABLE account, it's going to be you as a parent or guardian that's going to own it. If your child's over the age of 18, it can be them as the owner. If your child is over the age 18 and you are their guardian, well, it can still be the individual. It can still be your loved one, but then the guardian can be labeled as an authorized agent or an authorized representative, or even a power of attorney for that account. As long as, especially if your loved one does not have a guardian, then they can appoint a power of attorney just for their ABLE account. But if your loved one does have a guardian, then the guardian can be the authorized representative for this account. And why can that be important, that your loved one has ownership? I'll share with you a story here. When I was on the board of directors for the ARC of North Carolina, one of my fellow board members was a self-advocate, 40-year-old man. This gentleman was diagnosed with autism. And we were talking about, and we helped him get his ABLE account set up. And we were talking about the special needs trust that his parents left with resources in it. We talked about his ABLE account. And this is what he said, and it gives me goosebumps when I think about it. He said, yeah, well, I have that special needs trust, but my brother controls that. This ABLE account, Ryan, this ABLE account's my money. And he said that with such an empowered voice that I absolutely love. And I know that's one of the values that I saw on the website of NCDSA is empowerment. And it was that empowered individual and his voice, because he knew he had ownership of something. It was his. And he could save money in there. He could save his money in there. And that is powerful, everybody. It is powerful. So that is one of the main advantages of an ABLE account. Remember, I said place to save the individual's money. Their money. Let it grow for them, because it makes a difference in their life and in their confidence. So if you don't have an ABLE account and you're thinking, well, what state do I use? One thing I do want to tell you is that state residency is not a requirement to open an ABLE account. So if all of a sudden you do some research and you don't like something about the North Carolina ABLE account, you can use the Illinois ABLE account. You can use the New York ABLE account. What you want to do is make sure that you're comparing the attributes of the ABLE account that fit specifically for your family. Because one of the other things that is very important is you can only have one ABLE account. So, for example, if you live here in North Carolina and you and your loved one open up the ABLE account for them in North Carolina, and grandma lives in Illinois, Well, grandma can't open up an Illinois ABLE account and have your loved one be the owner and start dumping money in there, because an individual with a disability can only own one ABLE account. One. That's it. And so that's very important to understand. So here are some attributes that when you're thinking about an ABLE account, what kind of things do you want to look for? You know, one, there's a fantastic website. It's called ablenrc.org. Absolutely fantastic. You can compare 3 different ABLE accounts right next to each other on the site, and it is awesome. You want to look to see if your state has a state income tax deduction when you are making contributions to the ABLE account, right? If you're in North Carolina, I'll let you know North Carolina does not have that. So that's not going to be applicable either way. Annual maintenance costs are going to be important, right? Each ABLE account is run by each individual state. So you can't go into a bank and open an ABLE account. You have to go to the individual state's website to open up the ABLE account online. And so each state charges an annual maintenance cost. Usually you can lower that maintenance cost by doing an e-delivery of statements, but you want to compare the costs as well. North Carolina on e-delivery statements, I think, is maybe $39 a year, so very affordable. You also want to look at the investment options. And typically, all ABLE accounts will have investment options, and they'll be models. So if any of you have a 401k, and you'll notice the investment options will be, hey, your retirement target date 2035, your target retirement date 2040. And it's, you know, you put your money in this one item and it's a model, and it has all sorts of different funds inside and all different percentages and different types of allocations for your dollars. Well, the ABLE accounts work very similarly. Each ABLE account has usually 4 to 6 different investment models that your loved one can invest their money in. They can be very aggressive, be 100% in the stock market, all the way down to being 0% in the stock market. One of the elements that is extremely important, because this goes to actually using the account, right? Not just the details like I'm giving you so far, but the utilization of it, right? Not only putting the money in, letting it grow in these investment models, if you're comfortable with that, but how do I get the money out to go to the grocery store? How do I get the money out to buy clothes? How do I get the money out to buy something on Amazon that I like? Well, one thing that I always look for in an ABLE account, one attribute that's so important, is that distribution avenue. So what I'm always looking for is, does the ABLE account provide either a prepaid card, kind of like a prepaid debit card, where you can say, okay, let me take $500 from the ABLE account, put it on this prepaid card still connected to the ABLE account, and your son or daughter or loved one can use that prepaid card, grocery store, Amazon, Best Buy, wherever, until that balance goes to 0. And then either they have to, or the authorized representative for them has to reload that card. There are also ABLE accounts, and North Carolina is one of them, which is one of the reasons I really like North Carolina's ABLE account. I'm not just saying that because we're all in North Carolina, but I really do like it for this reason, is it has a checking account feature with it that comes with a checkbook and a debit card. Very easy to use the money. The other part that I really love about that is the tracking of it. So if any of you are your child's representative payee, right? If your children are already over the age of 18 and you are helping them manage their Social Security monthly, that SSI, on a monthly basis, and you're their representative payee, you know that you have to give accounts periodically to Social Security about what's going on with that money and where it is, what account's being used, and sometimes exactly what you're using it for. Well, ABLE accounts are no different. Social Security and the IRS can ask you for a list of distributions and what those distributions are used for, so that they can confirm that you're using the ABLE account in the correct and legal manner for qualified disability expenses. Well, just think about having a debit card or a checkbook. When you think about your own, right? Or even if you use a credit card, but if you use a debit card or a credit card and you get those statements, you can see every charge on those statements. And all you have to do is run a report. You don't have to keep receipts in a shoebox, that fade over time. And you got to figure out, oh my goodness, I don't know what we spent the money on. Because you don't want to do that and then get in trouble and maybe negatively impact your loved one's government benefits. So the debit card, if you ever are asked to confirm all those distributions, all you have to do is run the report from the ABLE account, from your ABLE account, right? From the website. You log in and you just run the report for whatever month they want to see the distributions of. And it makes it easy. So again, it's a utilization. It's how easy are these to use for everybody involved. Not only for you and your busy life, but for your loved one with a disability. And then, for that next team that kind of comes in when you're no longer able to be the authorized representative, who is that next authorized representative. Let's think about them too when we're setting this up, and let's make it easy for them going forward. So that's a part that's really important as we start talking about ABLE accounts. Special needs trusts have been around much longer than ABLE accounts. That's been kind of the go-to place for a family to put money to eventually help fund the lifetime support needs of their loved one. That's where it went, right? There was no ABLE account available. And an individual with Down syndrome or another intellectual developmental disability just really had to spend money, even if they didn't need to, right? If that amount was getting high in their checking or savings account, they would just have to go buy another mattress, even though they bought one last year, right? Buy another pair of shoes, even though they already have 10 pairs, right? They'd have to spend the money even if they didn't have to, because they couldn't put their money into the trust that their family is going to add money to, specifically like parents or grandparents. Now they can with this ABLE account, right? That's why I say it's a place to save the individual's money. Special needs trusts, we're really going to focus on third-party supplemental needs trusts because really, we could teach a week-long course just on special needs trusts. But, it's 8:00 at night on a Wednesday, and I don't want you to all of a sudden fall asleep. And if you're watching this on your computer, bang your head on the desk or on the computer because you fell asleep because I'm so boring. So I don't want to go into that much detail. But one of the things I do want to talk about is the special needs trust that 99% of families set up is going to be this third party. Third party means it's everyone's money other than your loved one with Down syndrome, right? You never add their money to this third party supplemental needs trust. It's third party money to them, meaning parents' money, grandparents' money, aunts, uncles, siblings, whoever else wants to fund or add money to help provide lifetime support for your loved one would add it to this third-party supplemental needs trust. And again, it's designed to pay for the similar things as an ABLE account, right? It's designed to pay for things that government benefits don't. It's designed to pay for things that if government benefits doesn't cover something, money from the trust can come in and pay for it. And again, just like ABLE accounts, these are unique, right? Just like ABLE accounts, you just don't go to any financial person. You don't go to the bank to open them up. It's specific on how to do it. Special needs trusts are the same. You don't go to any attorney and say, hey, I need a special needs trust. And they say, well, I did one 3 years ago. Get up and get out. Because they don't do it enough. They have to be done correctly in order for them to actually hold water and work. Because the whole idea of the special needs trust is to have another place along with the ABLE account that your loved one can have more than $2,000 available to them to live on for the rest of their life. And if that trust isn't written with the right language and correctly, Social Security can disqualify it as a special needs trust. And then all of a sudden, your loved one could lose their services, their supports, their income, their health care, everything. So again, it's important to make sure that these are set up correctly and specifically for what you want it to do for your loved one. And we think about setting these up. I really want to review with you two different ways that you can set them up. One is called inter vivos. And yes, I took 5 years of Latin in middle school through high school. And my mother would be disappointed in me because I didn't know what that even meant. I had to go look that up. I said, inter vivos, what the heck is that? Right? What it means is between the living. And I've been speaking English for 50 years. And I had to go look what that meant also. What it means is that it basically is a standalone trust, right? It is a separate document other than any of your other legal documents. So it's not part of your will. It is not inside of a revocable living trust. It stands on its own. How do you know if you have one like that? The way that you would know is that you signed a document that probably was named something like this. Your child's name and then supplemental needs trust, or your child's name, revocable supplemental needs trust, or your child's name, irrevocable supplemental needs trust. Something with your child's name in it and the date, right? And if you sign that separate document, probably going to be 25, 30 pages, and it's not connected to your will, right? It's two separate documents that you sign, two separate names on the top. Doesn't say, it doesn't say your last name. Let's say your last name is Smith. It doesn't say the Smith Family Trust. That's not a separate supplemental needs trust. That's a revocable trust that then could lead into a supplemental needs trust at a later date, but it's not a separate item. So that's one way to set up. The other way is what's called testamentary. Testamentary means that your loved one's trust lives inside of some other entity. So it lives inside of a will, or it lives inside of a revocable living trust, or that family trust I mentioned before. And it doesn't really exist until you no longer do. Right? So if you have a testamentary trust, it means that you have special needs trust language inside of your will. So you have to die before that trust actually pops into existence. I was doing one of these for a school a few years ago. And the principal of the school stopped me at this point. And she said, Ryan, can I share my story? I said, sure. And she went on to share that she's a sibling of a loved one with a disability, and it was her sister, and her mom died. And her mom had a testamentary trust. And she went on to describe her frustration with that, because not only did she have to, in that moment, right? And that's one of the things that I always talk about with our families that we serve is in the moment planning. How does your plan and the construction of what you've created actually work in the moment? And for this type of piece, a testamentary trust has to work in the moment of you dying. And here's what she said. She goes, Ryan, I was so frustrated because one, I was going through the loss of my final parent, my mom. I was the only sibling that had decision-making power to decide who writes the obituary, who's going to speak at her services, who's going to provide the eulogy. Where is my sister going to go? Where is she going to live? I guess she's coming to my house. What do I do with my mom's assets? How do I manage my sister's government benefits? And then I'm told I have to go figure out how to set up a special needs trust. She goes, I didn't know that it needed an EIN. right? Basically its own social security number. I didn't know where to go get that. I had to go, Ryan, to 5 different banks before one of them knew what a special needs trust was, and secondarily, how to actually set up an account in the trust name. Said if I could go back in time and ask my mom a question about her planning, I would plead with her, Mom, please make an inter vivos trust so that before something happens to you, we could already get an EIN from the IRS. We could set up an account in the name of the trust and do it in the right way and not do it rushed. And I don't care, Mom, put $50 in the account, but at least I know where the account is and that the money for my sister can go directly in. I don't have to figure it out. And I don't have to pay an attorney again to figure it out twice because they already set it up in your documents. But what I realized is because it was inside the will, I had to go set it up again and pay the attorney again to do it when my mom passed. So Ryan, please continue to tell everybody about both of these types of trusts and the way to set them up, and that not one is right and one is wrong, but one is simpler, especially for the next people that have to come and actually carry out the wishes. And so that's the story I wanted to tell you. Because if you don't have that one, it just makes it harder for those next people. It also reduces your flexibility in your planning, because with a testamentary trust, you can't add any money to it while you're alive, right? Grandmothers and grandfathers, aunts and uncles who want to leave money to that trust or want to give gifts to the trust, guess what? They can't if you're still alive. And if all of a sudden you want to start putting money in that trust at the end of your life, you can't. It's a testamentary trust because it's not in existence yet because you're still here. But if it's an inter vivos trust, you can. Grandparents can, aunts and uncles can. So it makes it more flexible, makes it more usable, and it makes it simpler to carry it out in the moment. So that's just something to consider. As you can tell, where I usually lean on that subject is certainly the standalone trust. How do you fund a special needs trust? Right? Well, you could put lump sum payments in there, right? Let's say you're cleaning your house this Saturday and you lift up the couch cushion and right next to the tuna sandwich is $10,000. Well, one, I want you to stop cleaning your house and I want you to find my phone number on our website and call me. I'll clean the rest of your house for you. I just get to keep what I find. And I say that in jest, but we have to remember that if you do want to add money to it, that you certainly can. But you always want to understand that one of the rules of a special needs trust for distribution purposes, withdrawals, right? How can I get the money out? Is it can only be used for the primary purpose of your loved one, right? The primary purpose of your loved one. So if you start funding it with a lot of money, be careful. It has to fit in your overall financial plan to do that, because if all of a sudden your car breaks and you need to buy a new one, or you see that spot in your ceiling, that watermark, and your roof starts to leak, you need to pay for that. Guess what money you can't use? You can't use money from the special needs trust because it's not for the primary purpose of the support needs of your loved one. So you got to be careful. I always talk about a special needs trust as the parent's pocketbook. And while you're alive, what does your pocketbook have to pay for? The one word that comes to mind when I think of that question is everything as a parent. But once you put money in the special needs trust, you can't use it for everything anymore. You can only use it for that one person in your family. So be careful. You can add periodic payments to an inter vivo standalone trust that you open an account in. You can open a checking account, savings account, investment account, have CDs in it, have mutual funds, buy Apple stock, whatever you want to do with it, you can. And you could add $100 a month to it, $1,000 a month, $50 a month, whatever. You could do that. But remember, you can't use it. And there could be tax issues with that as well, that we'll talk a little bit about, but not too much today. For most parents, because as I described as a parent's pocketbook, that you have to pay for everything. For most parents, usually they wait till the end of their life. Either they decide to fund it with, a life insurance policy, or they decide to fund it maybe with the sale of their primary home and the equity that comes out of it, or some other strategy that you might have to fund it. What you want to do is make sure your funding mechanisms are tax efficient. And that's very, very important, because you don't want to lose money on the asset flow from one generation to the other just because you don't understand the tax rules of that generational asset flow of those specific accounts, especially when it goes into a special needs trust, because taxes work differently in a special needs trust than even other types of trusts. And it certainly works differently inside of that trust than it does for you and I as individual taxpayers or married couples as taxpayers as well. So you don't want to be caught providing money to the government when you didn't have to, and then your child having less than you thought they were going to have. One of the most important jobs is a trustee. Remember how we said about able accounts, your child, as long as they're over the age of 18, can own the account, and then they can have an authorized person to help them with the decisions and the distributions and the contributions and any paperwork that's related to it. And remember how I told you about that in that adult earlier, about how the able account was his money and the special needs trust his brother was in charge of. Why did he say that? Because his brother was the trustee. The trustee of the special needs trust is the person in control. They are the decision maker. So when I think about choosing a trustee, I think of 4 responsibilities. 1, they should know your loved one. They should know your child. They should know what they like. They should know what they do. They should know their activities. They should know what the vision of their life and what their goals are, so that they can use the money in the trust for that purpose. Right? The idea of a special needs trust is not to have money in it at the end of your loved one's life. It's actually, if we could time it perfectly, it'd be able to get it to 0. Because the special needs trust, the money in there is designed to allow your loved one to live the best life they can and to support that best life with money. The other job of a trustee is they have to understand how to manage the assets inside of a special needs trust, which means they have to understand the tax rules inside of a special needs trust, because those rules help to determine how to manage the money inside of it. They have to make sure they do a tax return. And maybe, other than knowing your loved one, the other most important piece is they have to understand the distribution rules of a special needs trust. How do I use the money out in a fashion that follows the rules so that those distributions don't negatively impact the government benefits that your loved one is receiving? Huge. But when I start talking about trustees with families, especially if they come from a family with siblings, like adult siblings of their child with Down syndrome. Let's say, well, my one son is an attorney. He does real estate law. And my other daughter is in corporate finance, corporate accounting. And so they're going to be the co-trustees. And I say, okay, let me ask you one question. Do they know where the rules for special needs trusts are located? And everybody, when I ask that question, I literally can feel the air getting sucked out of the room. And I watch my families, when I ask that question, they sink, and they're like this in their chair. And they just shake their head, say, no, they don't. And I said, okay, Well, how successful do you think they're going to be if they don't even know where the rules are located? Have they ever managed one before? No, they haven't. So how successful do you think they're going to be? And they said, probably not very much. So what's the impact of that? Interruption or loss of all these government benefits and services, healthcare, income, housing, maybe, job supports. So do we want to avoid that? And of course, their answer is yes, Ryan. What a silly question that is. I said, great. Let's make them the trustee. And then they look at me like I'm absolutely nuts and I lost my marbles completely. I said, but let's give them help, right? Because those people know your loved one and they know what they need and they know what they want and they will demand it, which is awesome. Remember what I said before, the idea of the special needs trust is to use the money. It's not to have it grow and be some massive dollar amount. It's to use it. That's the idea. But let's give them help. Let's give them a co-trustee or an administrative trustee or at least a trustee advisor that knows the rules and knows where they're located, because it will make the trustee's life easier and simpler. Remember what I mentioned before about that adult sibling, about the ways to set up the trust, inter vivos testamentum, right? We got to make it simpler for them. Well, all of a sudden, if you dump a special needs trust in someone's lap and they've never managed one before, and they understand that if they don't manage it well, this individual could lose their services and their income and their health care. It's an awesome responsibility you just laid on somebody without giving them any level of support and any guidance whatsoever. So why not help them out? Why not give them that support? Why not make sure they have a guide and they have an advisor that can help them do that? And so to me, that makes a lot of sense. Just depends on if that makes sense to you as you're thinking about this planning going forward. So one of the things I promised you when we started tonight is I was going to share with you not just some of the nuts and bolts of these trusts and of these ABLE accounts, but also how do we use them? And I have this slide here, and it says versus, right? ABLE account versus special needs trust, like they're in some kind of competitive event against one another. I should really rename it. I should really rename it and say ABLE account and special needs trust, because they are not adversarial at all. They are completely complementary. And so when we think of the ABLE account, here are some situations that hopefully you'll remember, especially if they come up in your life. When do we use it? Well, if all of a sudden some dollar amount comes in for your child, your loved one, and it's more than $2,000 but less than $17,000, and it needs to be relocated fast because you don't want to lose their government benefits, ABLE account is awesome for that. And I'll give you an example. We just had this happen, right? We had an aunt pass away and leave $10,000 to all her nephew and nieces. Well, one of her nephews has an intellectual and developmental disability. They receive SSI, they receive the waiver, and they have Medicaid for their health care. Well, as we've all learned tonight, and you may have known before that, $10,000, is that more than $2,000? If it goes into their savings account, is that going to cause an issue for that asset resource limit? You better believe it will. But if it goes into the ABLE account, does it cause an issue for that asset resource limit? Absolutely not. What a blessing the ABLE account can be. Let's say your loved one is working and they're making money. Save it in the ABLE account. And this is another one of those situations that I get phone calls from families that we serve. And the parents are so excited because they've worked for this with their loved one for a long time. Just got one the other day. Say, Ryan, you won't believe it. John got a full-time job, 35 hours a week. He's making X amount of money, and they just offered him to put money in the 401k. Isn't that great? I pause. It's great for everybody else, but we have to remember that this planning is unique. It's different from 90% of everybody else. The decisions are different from 90% of every other family out there because of the other people, because of the other pieces of your loved one's support net that we always want to make sure is available. So I say, well, guys, let's not do that. And again, I feel that air coming out of their room that they're sitting in. I feel that deflation. You say, Ryan, what are you talking about? We wanted to save for his future. I say, we absolutely do. We absolutely do. But we don't want to do it in the 401k. And again, I'm not here to burst people's bubbles. I'm not here to be the wet towel and dampen everybody's enthusiasm. That is not my goal. My goal is to make sure that we avoid terrible consequences out in the future. So what I share is I say, listen, we've had these other situations where, yes, full-time job for a while, they put money in a 401k and then the wheels fell off, right? Either something happened at work, either the company no longer needed their position anymore, and they lost their job and then couldn't find another one. Well, now they have this money in a 401k, and that support net of those government benefits can't come back up and support them because they have more than $2,000 over here in a 401k. Let's say instead, now we have the ABLE account. Let's say no to that 401k for them and keep that same savings dollars, put it in the ABLE account. So if they work there for 10 years and end up having 30 grand in ABLE account and something happens to that job, well, they can keep the 30 grand and their government benefits can come right back up. That support net can come right back up and help them and be there for them. And they don't have to spend down that ABLE account. They can use it like an emergency fund and a long-term planning tool for themselves. Again, let's say they're not working, but they're not using all the income to live on. Save it in the ABLE account. Let's say you as parents have 529 college savings plans. You just start them all for all your kids. You never know what they're going to do. And you realize you're not going to use it all for your child with Down syndrome. Well, one of the rules in there is you can transfer those balances to an ABLE account and use it for more things than just higher education, as we looked at before. Let's say people want to know, they want to say, hey, you know, can we give birthday gifts, holiday gifts in terms of money to your child, right? We give it to all your other kids, right? Grandparents are famous for this. We give them gifts for all we give them birthday money and holiday money. And you keep telling us we can't do it for John. We don't like that. Well, guess what? Now you can. ABLE account, ABLE account, ABLE account. Here's what we want to think about. Total contributions for an ABLE account, think of lower amounts of money. Think of special needs trusts, larger amounts of money, right? So lump sum funding, right? Starting to get to the end of your life. Grandma passes away and gives $100,000 to each grandchild. Okay, well, that needs to go in that third-party supplemental needs trust. Right? If all of a sudden you have assets other than cash and investments, right? Specifically real estate. We have some families that fund a portion of their supplemental needs trust with real estate. It might even be the house or condo or townhouse that their child's going to live in. Or it could be rental real estate providing an income stream that provides for some of those needs of their loved one going forward. Well, you can't do that in ABLE account, right? That just doesn't exist in there. Let's say you have other children and you don't want the money that you've put in to help provide for your loved one's lifetime support needs to go back to the government at the end of their life. As long as you have a properly and accurately created supplemental needs trust, third party, with the correct language in it, and it's managed appropriately, and the money's distributed correctly for the right reasons, then money left over in that third-party supplemental needs trust is not required to pay back Medicaid for any of the services that your child has received. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And so when we think about special needs, I'm going to give you an example of how they work together, right? Because this is awesome. And this was a rule change for special needs trusts just a couple years ago. So two of the things that you're not supposed to pay for with the special needs trust, right? Two things you're not supposed to pay for. You're not supposed to pay for housing, right? Like rent and utilities. And you're not supposed to pay for food like the grocery store. What the government says is your loved one's receiving government benefits like SSI, maybe food stamps for that purpose. So if you do that, if you pay for those things with a special needs trust, we're going to reduce your loved one's SSI. Well, here's a game changer for you. And I get goosebumps about this because one of the things we do for families is we are that trustee advisor. We are that trustee guide. We help manage special needs trusts, and we do manage them. Is that now you can take money from a special needs trust, right, over here, and you can take money and fund an ABLE account every year. And what can you pay for from an ABLE account? You can pay for housing. You can pay for the grocery store. So now we get to use these two tools together to provide your loved one the best life possible. And that, everybody, is massively exciting. And those rules are there. And yes, we have to follow them, obviously, but they're always adjusting. They're always adjusting these rules with little tweaks like that. But those little tweaks can be unbelievable options that open up, or really unbelievable availability of money that opens up options for your loved one to live their best life. And that is what is so exciting. But really, ABLE accounts and special needs trusts are really just two planning tools. They're just two, right? These are all the other ones that you have to understand. And they have to be assembled correctly in your plan so that the ABLE and special needs trust can work the way you want them to. And so when we think about all these other pieces, it's so important to make sure that they are coordinated together and that you build the proper structure. So this is what your structure of your special needs plan should look like. And obviously the ABLE account fits in the financial category, the special needs trust fits in the legal category. All those government benefits I mentioned kind of fit down there. The tax strategy is critical, guys. Critical. I know that's not what we're talking about today, but tax strategy inside of special needs trust is critical, or else you're going to give money away to the government that you don't have to. And that money is now not going to be available to provide the lifetime support of your loved one with Down syndrome. And that can be completely avoided. So we want to understand all these pieces and how they function together to maximize effectiveness and efficiency. Because what that means is a better life. Just simply means a better life. And so I know from talking with Donna and obviously being on the NCDSA website, you guys have three words, right? Empower, connect, and support. Well, a special needs plan kind of has three words too. Education, action, and support, interestingly enough. Education are events like this. We love doing these. And you know, if you sign up for our newsletter, we do a series of webinars with organizations that are open to everybody who's on our newsletter on all sorts of different topics in that special needs planning umbrella. So we love doing those because we want you to be informed. We want you to make decisions that are informed, and so they end up being accurate. We want you to be an informed consumer as you're thinking about this planning. And then we want you to take action. You know, I don't know if anybody else has ever heard of the term knowledge is power. I don't believe it. Because you could have all the knowledge in the world and go sit yourself in a closet. It doesn't help anybody. You know what does? Applied knowledge. Applied knowledge is power because you took action and did something with it, right? Just like Leonardo da Vinci said, knowing's not enough, you have to do. And so I do challenge you guys today, and I challenge everybody at these events to take an action step. Whether that is, as Donna said, fill out the survey. If you want more information about a special needs plan, tell her, and she'll forward your information to us and we can reach out to you. Or go to our website, right? Go to that resource center that she'll include the link. It's got short articles, some long articles. It's got some longer webinars, but it's got short videos of frequently asked questions on all these topics, right? Our goal with our website was to help you avoid that late night Google search, right? Where you start, when you finally have some time to yourself at 11 o'clock at night and you're Googling special needs trusts and guardianship and SSI and waiver and ABLE accounts and housing, and you're Googling all these things. And at 1 a.m., the only thing that you come away with is red and bleary eyes. We wanted you to avoid that. Go to our resource center and use it, right? It's up there for you. We have a guidebook on special needs planning, or more like a booklet. Download it. It's free. But eventually, you need help with this. You have to choose your team, and you need advisors who are professional and know how to do this stuff. Guys, this stuff is not a do-it-yourselfer. And that is not an advertisement for a special needs plan, but it's an advertisement for professionals. So, if you don't like me, that's okay. Find somebody. And guess what? In that guide booklet, I will give you the questions to ask professionals to ensure they know what they're doing. Whether that's a current financial planner that you have, whether that's an attorney, a CPA, a trust company, whatever it is, ask those questions. And if they don't know the answers, they're not the professionals you should be working with. Again, I want you to be informed. I want you to be an informed consumer so that you make good decisions and you have the right people on your team. And then for us, support. And support is so important, because what we do is we work with families over 2 generations. That's how our organization is built. And I know if any of you went to the conference earlier in the year, you saw one of my colleagues, Andrew, speak on special needs planning. He is younger than I am. And that's a specific reason for that, because we do generational planning and we need to be here to not only support parents in the creation of it and the management of it, but we need to help support the next team members to ensure it's carried out well. And that's critically important. I've promised too many families that we're going to be around to do that for them. And so we will be. And so I just so appreciate you guys. I appreciate Donna having us. And I just love doing this. I don't know. Hopefully it didn't bore you too much. Hopefully it gave you some information. But I do see that there are going to be some question and answers, or some questions. I don't know if I have the answers, but I will try to answer them. I just pulled them up, everybody. And one of them is, don't understand why income from a disabled person cannot be used to help fund an ABLE account. So, Carla, I apologize if that wasn't clear. It can be used to fund an ABLE account. What it can't be used for is it's not going to decrease the income when it looks at qualification for government benefits on the monthly Medicaid income limit. So there are 2 different Medicaid qualifications from a financial standpoint. It's the asset resource limit of $2,000, and it's a monthly income limit. So my example before was, if your child's making $1,700 a month in income, they're going to be above that Medicaid monthly income limit. So I get calls and say, hey, Ryan, if we put $700 in the ABLE account from that $1,700, will Social Security only count $1,000 towards that Medicaid monthly income limit? The answer is no. They're going to count the whole thing. So that's where I'm sorry I wasn't clear on that. Hopefully I'm a little bit better on it now. Tim asked you a question. What would you recommend is the best way to transfer assets to the loved one when you pass away? Oh, let's see. Roth IRAs, home, other accounts. And so let me ask that one first. So the most efficient from a tax perspective are items that have already been taxed. So yes, Roth IRAs are fantastic. Life insurance is fantastic. Investment accounts right now also work very well. Equity from home works very well. Traditional IRAs and traditional 401ks from a tax perspective, not nearly as efficient because they have to pay income tax at the trust tax rates, which unless you're in the top tax bracket, and in order to be in the top tax bracket as a married couple, you have to earn over $600,000 of income, then that trust is going to pay more taxes on that 401k and IRA than you would. So those are good questions. So that's just a quick list of what are efficient ways to transfer which assets are. And do you know of any unique benefits or consideration for military dependents? Oh, we could do a whole session on that one too, Tim. So yes, if you were in the military and you have a military pension from the government, so not a civil service pension, but a military pension from the U.S. government, there is another different type of special needs trust that you have to set up. And this was approved at the end of 2014, also in the Defense Authorization Act at the end of 2014, that if you set up this specific special needs trust, then you can capture that survivor military benefit from your pension, and it can be received into this very unique type of special needs trust, and it will not count as income for your loved one in qualification for government benefits, and it can grow inside of that special needs trust. It's a special needs trust designed specifically to bring in a military pension as income and not impact any of the government benefits because it does not count towards that Medicaid monthly income limit. So yes, Tim, that is a unique benefit for our military veterans. So thank you very much, especially if you are one of them. Thank you, so that we could be here tonight in a free country, able to do a webinar like this. Fran, can you have both an inter vivos and testamentary trust? You can have as many supplemental needs trusts as you want. It's just how confusing do you want it to be for the next people? I would say you probably just want to have one. Where can you find the rules for special needs trusts? They're going to be in two places: the IRS and the Social Security POMs. Those are the two places. And I love that question. And if you want to make a career of it, give me a call. That's a lot to read. But God bless you. I love it. Once a special needs trust is funded, is it taxed? It absolutely is. You have to file a tax return. Fran asks, what is your website? It's a specialneedsplan.com. So you can certainly go to that. And if you guys have other questions, you can go to the contact us and you can write a question to us. And we can answer it directly from the website as well. Crystal, I have two kids with special needs, a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. What would you recommend us to start with first, ABLE account or special needs trust? Crystal, no doubt, start with a special needs trust. I always go on the oops, life didn't work out the way that you wanted it to, and one or both you or your husband are gone. An ABLE account's not going to help as much as a special needs trust will for your 2-year-old and 7-year-old. So I would definitely lean on the special needs trust to capture larger sums of money, especially if you guys have any, if you have 2 kids and, 2 and 7, you may have life insurance. And so that life insurance at those young ages can create a good sum of money to fund that special needs trust with. And those kind of life insurances can't go into an ABLE account because it just can't fit. It just has those limitations to it. So if I was thinking what I would do the special needs trust first. Oh, Veronica, good question. So I threw out that military service, and you said you're a civil service employee with a pension. Nothing. So there's no specific special needs trust for a civil service pension. Unfortunately, it's just the military pension.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm going to clean up the Q&A box here because there's one more up on the top.
Oh, okay.
that deserves our attention. And as the advocacy and outreach director for NCDSA, I will have something to add to what you have to say about the payback at death of a loved one to Medicaid,
Oh,
which was Fran's question.
yeah. So again, different pieces. So the ABLE account, yes, it balance in there and have a payback to Medicaid at your loved one's death. In a properly structured third party, and I know I keep saying that because it's important, a third party supplemental needs trust, there is no payback to Medicaid. In when you create that trust and when it's written, you, as what they call the grantor or the creator of that trust, you will determine where any remaining assets will go at the end of your loved one's lifetime. So if you have other children or you have a charity that you want it to go to, you will delineate that in the special needs trust. You can't do that with the ABLE account.
So I want to piggyback on what you're saying there and then ask a question about that. So one of the things you have to remember, the maximum that you can have in a special needs trust, that you can have in the ABLE account before it impacts an SSI benefit is $100,000. So as Ryan was saying, the goal of the ABLE account is to have money in the name of a person with a disability that they're living off of. So you should not, it's not best to look at the ABLE account as that long-term funding. So you have to remember there probably will not be that large of an amount left in the ABLE account. Plus, you can pay for medical benefits, you could pay for funeral expenses, you could pay for end-of-life expenses. So you could spend that money down and not worry about it going back to the government. The other thing is, North Carolina is not one of them, but advocates in other states have had the Medicaid payback repealed and is no longer effective in other states. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Ryan, is does the Medicaid payback only look at Medicaid health insurance, or does it also look at the waiver services? And if it does not at this time, what might happen if you know when the Department of Health and Human Services finally rolls out the tailored plan and the health insurance and the waiver services are combined? Did you follow that?
Yeah, and so that's a good question. And I'm not sure anybody knows the answer to it yet because they haven't been there that long that really, we haven't really had many payback situations yet. But the state could come back and ask for that money from the waiver. That's an option for them. Will they do it? You know, I don't know. Just like you said, there have been states that have repealed that payback. California is one of them. But I want everybody to know you can't just go to California and open up their ABLE account and think that you avoided the payback to North Carolina, because you have to be a resident of the state that repealed that part of the law. And the federal side could come back and still ask for some of their money back, because Medicaid is federal and state. But Donnie, you make a great point. That's one of the things that advocates are fighting for from a federal level, is to repeal that payback to Medicaid from a federal, which would be great. It'd be awesome. And the advocates have already had the law change. It starts in January of 2026, where because right now to open up an ABLE account, an individual has to be diagnosed before the age of 26, which is probably not an issue for anybody on this call, but it can be for many others. Especially we talked, about the military benefits and military veterans. Sometimes there's traumatic brain injuries, there's accidents with traumatic brain injuries, and somebody is now disabled at 30 and they can't use an ABLE account as of today. but in January of 26, they can, because they're bouncing that age to age 46. So that's a big deal. So there has been movement there, and there's changes all the time. As I said, with the special needs trust and ABLE accounts, being able to use them together and fund from a special needs trust into an ABLE account and use money, that wasn't part of the original law, but it happened about 4 years after that. So, you know, I love what, Donna, I love your points, because the only way that things do get improved is through advocacy, right? It's through, you know, usually parents fighting for it, which is basically always how it happens. And so I bet you, I mean, I think that payback to Medicaid is, I think we're going to start to see that wane over time, especially with states that have positive budgets, I guess I would say. You know, but, you know, we'll see where the government goes.
And I can inquire with my friends at the North Carolina Department of the Treasury that manage the ABLE accounts about what they're seeing, and also what they're seeing in other states about the clawback. And you mentioned something really important about how we are now able to transfer money from a special needs trust into an ABLE account to pay for what's considered in-kind support. But I really want to make that clear, that if you are taking money out of a special needs trust going directly to the beneficiary for those in-kind supports, such as housing and food, it will impact their means-tested benefits of SSI and Medicaid. But one of the things, you know, I love about having the ABLE account is that we can now save money. And it is so important for people with disabilities to be employed, especially the younger they are. I'm that older parent who in the next 5 to 10 years might care to retire. And for our loved ones that get SSI, when the parent starts drawing Social Security, the adult child benefit for the person receiving SSI will increase, and that can jeopardize some of their benefits. However, the younger a person is, disability or not, when they start working, they need less work credits to qualify for SSDI, which all of us probably on this call would qualify for if we worked during our lifetime. And what's important here is if your loved one qualifies for SSI, when they have enough work credits, they will qualify for SSDI. That's a different funding stream. And the other thing about that is once you're collecting SSDI for 24 months, on the 25th month, they qualify for Medicare, which is also a different source of benefits. So I love how you talked a lot of details and how everything worked together. So I really want parents and caregivers to understand that there are so many different tools out there that you can use to benefit your loved one. And the other thing too about that $100,000 limit is if you have a younger child, if you're putting money in there by the time they're 18, 20, 25, and they may have an opportunity to live independently. And when I say independently, I mean outside the family home. Is this where you could reduce that $100,000 by a down payment on a townhouse that they could share? Would that be applicable to spend down that $100,000 from the ABLE account?
Well, they would have to own it completely.
Okay.
If you do that, because that's their money. So what we always say is, again, flexibility is what I always preach. And so what I would rather see a family do of a young child is save that money in a different kind of account, right? And you know, you can have multiple different, so let's just say they use a joint investment account. Mom and dad are the owners, put money in, they kind of know this is for their loved one with a disability. Well, then make it what's called a joint with TOD, right? Transfer on death directly to their special needs trust. Because in that way, if something happens to the parents, it still goes directly to the special needs trust, because that was the purpose, was to help to support that child. But then also, if they are age 18 and there's opportunities, or 25, and that accounts 100 grand, and they want to buy a house, then really the parents can buy it, keep it in their name, and then they can put that house inside of the special needs trust, because that makes it safer for the individual with disability when it comes to SSI and ABLE accounts and special needs trust trying to pay for housing and in-kind support when it's not inside of a special needs trust. So it just makes it a little bit cleaner, if that's a situation that the family's going to go, is to have that house eventually owned by the special needs trust, because then the loved one, if they have roommates or they have we have some of these situations where, families do have the waiver, they have supported living, and the family buys a condo, maybe it's a 3-bedroom condo, there's a roommate that has a disability, it's their loved one, and then the direct support professional from the service provider is in that third room. Well, that can be an income source for the special needs trust, right? Because they can get rent from the roommate, it can get rent from the service provider for that direct support professional, and really it receives rent from the child who is receiving government benefits, who is the beneficiary of the trust, right? And that works well from a government benefit standpoint and a tax standpoint, and turning government benefits into trust assets, which is pretty awesome, right? So all sorts of different techniques, but just like you said, Donna, there's so many different pieces that can be advantageous, but they can also be pitfalls if everything's not structured well enough to receive it.
It's kind of like, going into a fast food restaurant where you build your own whatever, and you could pick from all these different categories, but not making light of the subject, but that's exactly what this is. And just like benefits counseling, this is completely individualized. It has to do with the resources a family has and the plans that they and their person with the disability have for their future. So we have one more question here. Okay, more questions. Well, Tim said this has been supreme. If I don't have my glasses on, they're on top of my head. Supremely helpful. Thank you. Follow up. Does the military special needs trust for the pension remain in effect after the spouse passes as well?
I think you're going to like this answer, Tim. Yes.
Awesome.
And Harshard, what happens to the money in the ABLE and special needs trust after the beneficiary passes away? Can we control that action? Yes, you can. You can control it in the special needs trust because you have already written where that money goes, if there's any left over. And yes, you can give it to a charity. You can give it to another person with a disability. You can certainly do that with an ABLE account as well, as we mentioned. As Donna mentioned, right? We at death, we're hoping the ABLE account is a lower amount of money, and that you start using it, like you said, for funeral expenses and all sorts of end of life pieces to make sure that that money is used going forward.
Okay, and as the Ag-Vaccine Outreach Director, I need to tell everyone about the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act. It has been introduced in both the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives. They both have a bill. You will get information about this in the follow-up email next week. But what it basically is, these asset limits where we're talking about $2,000 for an individual and $3,000 for a married couple has been that dollar amount since 1986 or 1989.
1989 with no cost of living inflation adjustment on it. It's disgusting. Anyway, go ahead. Donna, go ahead.
And so this legislation, the Senate and the House of Representatives, it's identical. It's barely 3 pages. There is nothing, I say nothing in this legislation that is partisan, that would impact anything else that a legislator would not want to support. So it is extremely important that you advocate for this legislation and you get everyone you know to advocate for this legislation. And you know how they say sometimes, like, the plumber's wife has leaky pipes? Well, the advocate's son usually has an overpayment because of SSI. I'm fortunate my son is working. He is making so much money. It's very easy for him to go over that $2,000 asset limit because he spends his money. He stops at the convenience store and he buys a Gatorade or a chocolate milk. You know, we let him buy some groceries, but it's not enough to spend down some of that money. And, you know, there have been several months where on that first moment, that first day, we were over that $2,000 limit. And it's going to create havoc. One, because the people at the Social Security Administration hasn't responded to any of my letters saying, I know we've had an overpayment. Can we look at this? But that would make it that much easier for families not to have to worry. And I'll admit, $2,000 is a lot of money to a lot of people. But the flip side of raising this to $10,000 is not just making it easier to account for the earned income and the asset limits, but there's many people who get SSI and other means tested benefits who are pretty much self-sufficient. They are married. And I'm sorry, but if you need to replace your refrigerator, you're going to need almost as much as $2,000. If you need to replace the transmission in your car, you're looking at $2,000. And this is where it comes into that snowball effect where, well, I don't have a car now. I can't get to work. I'm going to lose my job. I'm not going to be able. It's just, so I can't stress enough how much I need everyone here tonight, and that might be watching this recording, to look into. It is Senate Bill 2767 and House Bill 5408. I will have that in the email that you will get next week. But this is one of those education, action, support. You know about it, you can do something about it, and you can help your loved ones.
That's
okay,
right.
So Vandana has one last question here.
Nope.
You want to go ahead and take that, Ryan?
Let me see. So I understand it right that the main benefit of the interview trust to have every information available for the trustee after the parents pass away. The main benefit of the Inter Vivos Trust is it actually exists today. So it's not really just when the parents pass away, but it exists today so that everything else can be set up around it. Meaning, you know, these kind of trusts need basically its own social security number. So if you have a separate document, right, this standalone trust, you can go to irs.gov and get an EIN. That employer identification number is basically a social security number for that trust, right? A special needs trust, a supplemental needs trust should never be under the social security number of your loved one with a disability. It will get disqualified immediately. So it has to have its own tax ID number. You get that at irs.gov. That tax ID number allows you then to open an account. Eventually you want to open an account. I don't care if you put $50 in it. You don't want to put a lot of money in it because you don't want to trip a tax return and cost you more money than necessary. The reason that you're opening the account is so that if something happens to you and you go to work tomorrow in your car and a tractor trailer runs you over and you're not here anymore, that next trustee knows that that account already exists and money can be put into it that next day. And they don't have to go try to figure out how to set one up. And they don't have to go to an attorney to get that document reworked, and they don't have to go to irs.gov to get an EIN. So what it is, the reason to do it is ease of use for the next people. The other reason to do it is if you do have family members that do want to provide financially, or they're doing that in their will, and they want to do that for your loved one with a disability, you don't want them to write your child's name in their will, because if they get that money directly to them, they can be disqualified from government benefits if it's more than that $2,000 asset resource limit for now. Hopefully 10 soon, Donna, I'm hoping. And so, but if you have that standalone trust already existing, you can tell your other family members to say, hey, instead of giving it to John, change your will, change your beneficiary designations on your life insurance or wherever you're getting the money from to John Smith Supplemental Needs Trust, because it exists already. And so you can put it in there. And I know a lot of people are like, well, my family doesn't have any money, they're not giving me any. Well, I've had a few of these examples, but one of them was a sergeant in the Charlotte Police Department. And he told me that exact thing. He's like, Ryan, I don't think we have to worry about that stuff because no one's giving me any money. You know what happened? He set it up that way and he told his family. And his brother, who was divorced, no kids, said, thank you so much for telling me that, because I had my nephew on every single one of my beneficiary designations, 401k, pension plan, life insurance at work, everything, because he knew that they needed the money to help care for him forever. But he did it totally wrong. But now he had an avenue to do it right. So that's kind of the reason.
Or and even with the ABLE account, you're limited to the gift amount per year. And if a family's already contributed X amount of dollars, we're talking less than $17,000 at this point. And most life insurance policies.
Or maybe like your son's situation, right? He's putting his own money in. Right. And so if he's saving his own work money, that starts chipping away at that dollar amount as well.
He doesn't know that, so let's be quiet about it.
Exactly. That's right.
Nobody else. If you see Thomas at the Buddy Walk, don't mention it.
Yeah, don't say anything. Don't say anything.
Okay. And then Vanda says, got it. Thank you. All right. Well, I just want to put a plug in. The November session for the virtual speaker series is technology and apps for everyday living. And this is not just for that independent living, whatever it looks like outside the home. There'll be applications that you could use for your child, regardless of their age, regardless of where they are living. So registration for November is open. And the link was in the email I sent out with the link for this webinar tonight. In that email is also the evaluation form that I'd like you to take, just less than a minute to complete. Do know that the responses are anonymous. So if you type something into the comment section on the evaluation form, I cannot respond to that unless you tell me who you are, or if you just want to email me directly from the email that you got yesterday. It is after 9. This was a lot of dense information, but a lot of really fine details that I appreciate you sharing with everyone, Ryan. I want to thank you for spending your Wednesday evening with us and sharing it with the participants tonight. I want to thank all of our participants for trusting the NCDSA and the other Down syndrome groups across the state for putting this together and coming out on, staying in on your Wednesday evening to learn about this. NCDSA really wants to work to make sure that we have positive healthcare and quality of life outcomes for individuals with Down syndrome across the state. And having these tools in place and that forward thinking about where should your child live and work in the future, we just really want to push those conversations and make sure you have the tools available to make the right decisions. Let's see, there's a couple more things in the Q&A. We got thank you. We got a couple claps. That would be applause. All right. Everyone have a great rest of the evening. Ryan, again, thank you. Everyone has my email address. So if you need anything, just reach out to me directly and hopefully I'll see everybody. I don't see anybody. There's no pictures of anyone. I will be in your presence next month. All right.
Yep.
Okay. With
Thank you, Donna.
Good night. Thank you. Good night, everyone.